Hello, and welcome to the Yankee Seasons Podcast, Episode 9, Ups and Downs. Last time, we broke down the Yankees' massive home opening series against their American League rivals, the Boston Red Sox, where they decidedly handled the Bo Sox, out-pitching them, out-hitting, and at times even out-erroring them. However, this time we don't look to the newspaper trimmings of box scores to start the episode. We start with the hot off-the-press April 23, 1956 issue of Sports Illustrated, which showed on their cover who they dubbed the spark plug of the Yankees. The first magazine of 1956 to throw a Yankee on a cover of their publication that year. And I'm only trying to further the suspense and draw out who it could possibly be. Any final guesses? Mantle? No, his will have to wait. Yogi, maybe? If you had second baseman Billy Martin on your bingo card, then bingo. Billy Martin had an exclusive Paul O'Neill write-up. Not that Paul O'Neill. A feature story titled The Damnedest Yankee of Them All that covers Martin's time in the service, being drafted by the Athletics before donning the pinstripes, and the difficulty and defeat during the 1955 World Series. Martin was brash, scrappy, the kind of player that you knew would do anything for the win. The mentality of the average player in 1956 has to be considered further to understand a player like Billy Martin. Most of the players in 1956 had served their country during war, if not two wars. Some, if not most, actually saw combat on multiple occasions. The intensity, the ferocity of even your average player was significantly more amplified than what we would today be accustomed to seeing, than what would even be allowed. Spiking players on double play balls, pile driving into a catcher to try and knock the ball loose, a physicality that, for everyone's sake, has been tamed. But during that time, while the physicality and intensity was there, Billy Martin was considered the damnedest Yankee of them all. He looked like he had been plucked off the inner city streets of New York, put in a Yankee uniform, and told to go get on base. And he would. Martin wouldn't be in the lineup, though, on Tuesday, April 24th, when the New York Yankees hosted the Washington Senators for a day game. Gil McDougald would get the start at second and bat second behind Hank Bauer at left field and in front of Mickey Mantle in center. Then all the usual suspects, Yogi at catcher, Moose at first base, Joe Collins in right, Andy Carey at third, and the rookie Jerry Lumpy at shortstop, with Johnny Cucks on the mound for his second start of 1956. If you'll remember, his first start of the season, also against the Senators, saw the Yankees getting a massive early lead, which gave Cucks a long leash. He would pitch 7 2/3, and he looked great until the 8th inning when he got 2 quick outs, but gave up that base hit to Clint Courtney and then walked 2 to load the bases. Again, with 2 outs, Constanti completely blew it, giving up a single and then walking in 2 more runs, all given to Cucks. So, despite looking good in his first start, Cucks kinda lost it at the end, and Constanti couldn't hold it together for him. Cucks would definitely want to improve on his last outing against a Senators team that sent Chuck Stobbs to the mound. Stobbs had earned a win for himself in his first start of the season and was now tasked with facing the Bronx Bombers at home. Good luck. The first few innings were pretty non-productive. Each team had players reach base, but nothing was capitalized. Mantle would hit singles in both the first and third inning, but it wasn't until the bottom of the fourth that the first runs of the game were scored. Joe Collins singled to right field. Andy Carey and Jerry Lumpy each flew out, but with 2 outs, Johnny Cucks got a base hit, trying to get himself a rally going and maybe some run support. Hank Bauer came to the plate and belted a 3-run home run, his second of the season, for a 3-0 lead. After McDougald grounded out to end the inning, the Senators responded. Carl Olson hit a 1-out double and scored when Jerry Snyder singled 2 batters later. 3-1, still the Yankee lead. In the bottom of the 7th, with 2 outs, Yogi Berra hit his own home run, a solo shot, in his 4th of the early 1956 campaign, giving Johnny Cucks and the Yankees the 4-1 lead. And that's exactly how it would end. Cucks would go full 9 innings, allowing just 1 run on 7 total hits. Now 6-1, the Yankees maintained their position atop the American League and had finished off an impressive first 4 games at home in 1956 by sweeping the Red Sox and then the 1 game against the Senators. It was time to hit the road, though, as they would face the Orioles for 2 games in Baltimore and then head to Boston for another quick 2-game series against the Red Sox. Whitey Ford would take the mound for the Yankees when they squared off against the Orioles, who had mustered 2 wins in their first 7 games, for a 2-5 record. 13,753 attendants made the trip on a Wednesday night to Memorial Stadium, where the hometown O's sent Irv Palika to the mound for his second start of the season. He would be the one charged with the first earned run when Gil McDougald hit his first home run of the season, a solo shot in the top of the fourth inning that, other than a few sporadic singles, was the first real action of the game. As McDougald rounded the bases, Mantle stepped out of the on-deck circle to greet him at home plate. That's right, Palika had just given up a one-out solo shot home run, but now he had to face a red-hot Mickey Mantle. He buckled at the pressure and walked him. Mantle on first with still one out. Yogi Berra stepped into the batter's box now. Palika wanted nothing to do with him either, walking Berra to bring up Skowron, who was also having a red-hot start to the season. Skowron would continue on that success by singling to left, and Mantle would score from second. Palika was able to strike out Joe Collins looking, and Jerry Lumpy grounded out to end the inning, but the Yankees had struck first, and it was 2-0. Ford would continue to mow down the Orioles, but with quick outs in the bottom of the sixth, the Orioles mounted a rally. Jim Dyke was able to single to left, and a rare pass ball allowed him to run to second. Dave Philly was able to take advantage of the opportunity by hitting a single to center that scored Dyke. The next batter was also able to make the most out of this rough infielding when Jerry Lumpy committed an error on a ground ball to short that allowed Gus Triendos to reach and have runners on the corners. That brought up Jim Peeburn. Again, all of this with 2 outs. Peeburn also capitalized on the opportunity by singling to right and tying the game 2-2. Ford was able to make Gardner pop out to Skowron to end the inning, but some costly 2-out errors had blown the lead and tied the game. The Yankees took no time at all, though, to make matters right and pick up their pitcher. With 1 out in the top of the 7th, Jerry Lumpy and Andy Carey worked 2 consecutive singles. That brought up Whitey Ford to the plate, and despite hitting a ground ball to second, the ball was thrown away by the shortstop trying to turn the double play. Lumpy scored, Ford ended up on second, and with 2 outs, the Yankees had retaken the lead on the theme of the day, capitalizing on errors. Hank Bauer then stepped up, and with Ford on second, hit a massive shot off the left field wall, and Bauer ended up on third. The Yankees now led 4-2, and that would be how it would end. Ford would pitch the entire game, and into the game striking out Tom Gestall for his 8th strikeout of the night. With a 7-1 record, the Yankees held a commanding lead in the American League, but despite this, Stengel took to the papers essentially saying they were lucky. After their sweep against the Red Sox, Stengel chalked it up to the fact that Boston, quote, didn't play the game they can, and they didn't have the big fella. Of course, referring to Ted Williams. He had a fair point, though, considering the Yankees had already blown an 8-run lead. If we know anything about baseball, though, it is a larger sport than one game. Across the majors, through the Yankees' first 8 games, Mantle and Berra each trailed Ray Jablonski 4 home runs to Jablonski's 5, but they were tied with runs batted in with 13. The production wasn't just coming from Mantle and Berra, although what they were doing was insane. In batting average, 4 of the top 5 batting averages were Yankees. Mantle, Skowron, and Berra led the top 3 batting, 448, 438, and 407 respectively, and Jerry Lumpy was actually in 5th in the American League with his 346 average, trying to make up for all those errors. The next day, Thursday, April 26th, the Yankees would finish their quick 2-game road trip with a day game sending Tommy Byrne to the mound. Stengel had really locked in his lineup, making no changes, keeping Lumpy at shortstop. Bauer in left and Collins in right, all of it. For the Orioles, they would send 34-year-old Jim Wilson, who in 1955 led the league in losses with 18. Never really a category you want to lead in. Hank Bauer led off the top of the first by working a walk. Then Gil McDougald singled and moved Bauer to second. Mickey Mantle hit a hard-line ground ball to Gus Triendos, the first baseman, who really only had one play, which was the force out at first, moving Bauer and McDougald to second and third. Wilson and the Orioles didn't want to mess with Yogi Berra, who now stood in the batter's box, and they intentionally punched his ticket to first on 4 straight balls. That brought up the red-hot Bill Skowron, with 1 out and bases loaded only to have him fly out to center, which now brought up a lukewarm Joe Collins with now 2 outs. Joe Collins would smack a triple, bringing everyone home and making the score an early 3-0. Jerry Lumpy would single to score Collins from third, bringing the score to 4-0 before Andy Carey grounded out to end the inning. The Orioles responded with a string of singles off Bobby Adams, Jim Dyke, and Dave Philly, which would score a run and by the end of the first inning bring the score at least 1 run back to 4-1. Other than a Gil McDougald single, the Yankees did nothing in the second, but the Orioles started the inning off with Billy Gardner hitting a home run over the left field wall to make it 4-2. Tommy Byrne would then get 2 outs but walk the next 2 batters, and Tom Morgan was brought in with 2 outs, runners on first and second, in just the second inning. Morgan would strike out Tito Francona to end the inning and the drama until the top of the sixth. Bill Skowron led off the inning by hitting a single to right, but then got picked off by the pitcher Jim Wilson during Joe Collins' at-bat. Collins, now with one out, hit a double for his second long hit of the day. Jerry Lumpy flew out to right, but a base hit from Andy Carey would score Collins to bring the total to 5-2 Yankees, before Tom Morgan ended the inning by grounding out to short and stranding Carey on base. This took the game to the bottom of the sixth. First baseman Gus Triendos would start the inning with a solo home run, 5-3. Jim Peeburn then hit a single to right before Billy Gardner would hit a double and move Peeburn to third. Second and third, no outs, and Bob Boyd would pinch hit for catcher Hal Smith. Boyd would walk to load the bases, still no outs. Bob Grimm came in to replace Tom Morgan on the pitcher's mound for the Yankees, picking up quite a mess from Morgan, and Bob Hale would pinch hit for the shortstop Willie Miranda. Hale, batting with bases loaded and no outs, would hit a ground ball to Billy Martin at second, who threw to second to get the force out and start the double play. The return ball didn't make it, though, in time, and Hale was safe at first. Jim Peeburn was able to score, and Billy Gardner advanced to third. That brought up Dave Pope, pinch hitting for Jim Wilson, the pitcher, and Hale was replaced by Fred Marsh as the pinch runner at first. So there's one out. We have Fred Marsh, the pinch runner, on first. We have Billy Gardner on third. And now Dave Pope is pinch hitting for Jim Wilson. Okay. With one out, Bob Grimm threw the pitch, and Dave Pope grounded it to Bill Skowron at first. He threw to Grimm, but the throw wasn't caught. Gardner was able to score. Marsh broke towards third, and Pope, who was sure he was an easy out at first, now tore off to second. Reacting, Bob Grimm threw the ball, trying to get them out at second, but now it was booted by Jerry Lumpy. So Marsh was able to score. Pope, who had hit the ground ball to the first baseman, a routine ground ball to the first baseman, was now on third base with a Little League triple. The Orioles had taken the lead off some horrendous pitching and then some even worse fielding. Bobby Adams, now batting with a runner on third and still only one out, would line a single, scoring Pope and taking the Orioles to lead 7-5. The Yankees had imploded, and the Orioles had capitalized. Stengel had seen enough and pulled Grimm, bringing in Jim Constanti, his reliable veteran, who could always be counted on if you have short-term memory loss and just remember the prior years. He pitched Tito Francona into popping out to Jerry Lumpy, and then Dave Philly did the same, this time to Andy Carey in foul territory off the third baseline. The inning was over, but the spirit of the Yankees had been crushed, at least for that Thursday. In their last 3 innings of attempts, the only batter to reach base was Bill Skowron on an error charged to Fred Marsh. Constanti wouldn't let another batter reach, and the game ended in a brutal 7-5 defeat. Jerry Lumpy had committed his 7th error of the season in just the first 9 games. At the plate, Hank Bauer continued his early struggles, striking out 3 times to bring his average to just 189. Despite some early dominance, there were clear signs of struggling for the team starting off its 1956 campaign. Tom Morgan, too, showed that going 3 innings was probably going to be too much for him, as he looked solid in the first few innings of work, but it all kind of unraveled quickly there at the end. Many had their eyes on the pitching woes of the old professor's staff. Dan Daniels writes in Sporting News that while everyone touts the Yankees as the betting favorites to repeat and win the American League, Daniels believes their pitching struggles are more than enough reason to hold them back from being sure favorites. He writes, quote, "The unsettled state of Casey's pitching became apparent when just before the season's opener in Washington, Stengel announced that they had been forced to shift from Whitey Ford, for weeks the accepted favorite for the inaugural call, to Don Larson, the wild driver of the dawn. This was truly a switch." And switch was in all caps. It was dramatic. Also, the wild driver of the dawn is my absolutely new favorite nickname for Don Larson, and I refuse to refer to him as anything else. This was referring to the night, or I suppose the morning at around 3 a.m. when Don Larson crashed into a light pole while driving. He said he had just fallen asleep at the wheel, but, I know you remember that, and Dan Daniels remembers that too, because the wild driver of the dawn is iconic. Okay. The wild driver of the dawn really had been chosen as their starter for opening day by force and not choice. And also Daniel highlights that Ford had not really been featured in spring training exhibition games. Bob Turley didn't impress. Bob Grimm was all but confirmed to be reduced to bullpen work. Mickey McDermott, it was reminded, suffered an 11-run inning to Brooklyn. And Tommy Byrne had had a tough spring and couldn't even make it 2 innings. The main highlights had been that Jim Constanti, despite his age, had looked elite, despite, again, that last game where he kind of blew it. And at camp, he taught Johnny Cucks a new slider that Cucks had seen some success with. So there were some things to work on, but obviously some glaring issues and some glaring holes as well. Daniels notes that the Yankees have had high expectations of Cucks, as evidenced by giving him the second start of the season in Washington. The wild driver of the dawn would be sent to the mound for the Yankees the following day, Friday the 27th in Fenway, against their rivals, the Boston Red Sox. Before we get into that game as well, let's just also remember that the wild driver of the dawn just hit a grand slam in his last game, and already going into this game has 4 RBI. He's a monster. Okay. Tom Brewer grabbed the ball for the Bo Sox in front of the crowd of 12,626. Stengel had decided Lumpy's errors were enough, that an error a day was just too costly, so Stengel sent him to the bench and replaced him with his veteran scooter, Phil Rizzuto. This change meant the lineup was for grabs, so facing Brewer that Friday afternoon in Fenway was Rizzuto at short, Gil McDougald at second, Mickey Mantle at center, Yogi behind the plate, Bill Muscowren at first, Hank Bauer taking up his usual spot now in right field, batting 7th, and in left field, Elston Howard. Batting 8th, Andy Carey at third base, and batting 9th, the wild driver of the dawn, Don Larson. Oh, wow. The wild driver of the Don Larson. No, okay, I don't like that as much. The wild driver of the Don, Don Larson. Other than Mickey Mantle getting plunked, both the Yankees and the Red Sox bats went 1-2-3 in the first inning. Leading off in the top of the second, Bill Skowron worked a walk. Hank Bauer struck out, but Elston Howard hit a 1-out single to bring batters to first and second. Tom Brewer was able to strike out Andy Carey to make it 2 outs, but the Yankees were able to score off of a drive down the left field gap off the bat of... I'm sorry, who is that? Who's batting 9th? The wild driver of the dawn, Don Larson himself, doubled down the line to move Howard to third and score Skowron for the first run of the game. Rizzuto would work a walk, but McDougald grounded out to end the inning. Larson, then relishing in his double, walked Jackie Jensen. Gernert then singled, and then walked Jim Pearsall to load the bases with no outs. The wild driver of the dawn, really showing how wild he is, knows pressure like most of us don't, and he was able to strand every one of those runners. Larson actually locked in, making the Red Sox go 1-2-3 in the bottom of the third and fourth, bringing the game to the top of the fifth, where with 2 outs, Yogi Berra singled to left field. Skowron then reached on an error and advanced Berra to third. Hank Bauer, waking up his sleepy bat, hit a 2 RBI single, bringing the Yankees' lead to 3-0. And the score stayed that way until the bottom of the 7th, where Larson, to this point, was pitching a masterclass. He must have read his Dan Daniels article and liked his new nickname as much as I do. Dick Gernert led off the bottom of the 7th and flew out to Elston Howard. Pearsall then hit a single. Budden hit a single. And with runners on first and second with 1 out, the Red Sox sent Ted Williams in to pitch hit for Sammy White, their catcher. And Williams flew out to Mantle in center. Grady Hatton then was brought in for pitcher Tom Brewer, and he was more successful when he hit a single and was able to score a run to bring the Red Sox back to 3-1. Billy Goodman then grounded out to Bill Skowron, who threw it to Larson to record the out and end the inning. That brought the Yankees back up to the plate. Skowron would lead off with a strikeout, and then with 1 out, Hank Bauer was able to knock a base hit, and then Elston Howard sent a towering shot to center that Pearsall could only watch. A 2-run home run, taking the Yankees' lead up to 5-1. Andy Carey would line out to Don Budden at short, and Don Larson would hit another single just to pad his average, because that's what the wild driver of the dawn does, but Rizzuto would ground out to end the inning. Still pitching in the 9th, Don Larson faced Jim Pearsall, who sent a long shot to right field where Hank Bauer couldn't make the play, and was charged with an error allowing Pearsall to reach second. Don Budden then singled and moved the runners to first and third with no outs. The Red Sox are attempting to mount a comeback. Snuffing out comebacks, though, is just the type of thing the wild driver of the dawn does best. Pete Daly bobbled the ball right back to the mound, and Larson started the 1-4-3 double play that, while it allowed the unearned run to score from third, Pearsall, it still got 2 outs. Faith Roneberry then pinch hit for the pitcher spot and flew out to Mantle to end the game. The Yankees won 5-2, and the wild driver of the dawn secured his 2nd win of the season. The Yankees were still undefeated against their Boston rivals in 1956. 27,357 fans would make it for the Saturday game the next day when Bob Turley would square off against Frank Sullivan. Stengel kept Rizzuto in the lineup, along with the other changes he had made the day before, and Rizzuto started the game by grounding out to Billy Goodman at second base, who threw it over to Mickey Vernon at first. That brought Gil McDougald up, who singled and put a runner on first for Mickey Mantle. Mantle launched the ball to right field that stayed in the park, but McDougald scored from first. The Yankees were quickly on the board 1-0. It stayed that way until Jim Pearsall was able to hit a double off Bob Turley to score Jackie Jensen and tie the game 1-1. Turley responded to the run in the top of the fifth by leading off with a base hit. Rizzuto sacrifice bunted to move Turley to second. McDougald then singled and Mantle worked a walk. And with bases loaded, Yogi Berra singled to retake the lead 2-1. The Red Sox brought the score back level in the bottom of the sixth, where with 2 outs, Dick Gernert crushed a home run over the Green Monster. That started an attempt at a real comeback, where Jim Pearsall singled back to Turley, Budden then worked a walk, and the catcher Sammy White singled to load the bases. Pitcher Frank Sullivan was pulled, and they brought in the big man, Ted Williams, who flew out to Hank Bauer and right to leave the runner stranded. The Yankees struck back in the top of the seventh when Bill Skowron doubled to score Gil McDougald and retake the lead 3-2, but the back and forth wasn't done. In the bottom of the seventh, Billy Goodman led off and singled to right. Frank Malzone laid a sacrifice bunt down to move him to second. Mickey Vernon would crush a ball over the right field fence, and the Red Sox took the lead for the first time 4-3. They weren't done. Jackie Jensen popped out to second after Dick Gernert worked a walk. Jim Pearsall was able to get a base hit to the deep as part of right field, and Bauer wasn't able to get the throw-in to stop Gene Stevens, pinch running for Gernert, from scoring. 5-3 Red Sox. In the top of the eighth, Jerry Coleman, who had been brought in to play shortstop, walked with 1 out. Gil McDougald grounded out on a weak dribbler, so there was no double play opportunity, just the force out at first. Mantle, sitting on a double and single already, hit a triple to score Coleman from second and leave him a home run shy of a cycle. The ball had hit the top of the center field fence, and Stengel had argued that it should have been a home run. He argued so much that Ed Rommel, second base umpire for the game, threw Casey out of the game. Yogi would fly out to Pearsall in center to end the top of the eighth, with the Yankees still trailing the Red Sox 5-4. Bob Hubling wrote that Casey got thumbed out, Yogi Berra flied out. Frank Malzone would add another run to the Red Sox total, though, in the bottom half of the eighth when Jim Constanti, now pitching in Bob Turley's place, gave up a 2-out double to Billy Goodman and then a single to Malzone to score the runner. The 6-4 score would stand when the Yankees went 1-2-3 in the top of the ninth, and the Yankees lost the game. Their third loss of the season and the first to the Red Sox. Stengel had been ejected. They had split each of their series a game apiece to the Orioles and the Red Sox, and allowed the White Sox to improve their footing in the standings, only a technical half game behind the Yankees, having played 5 games fewer than the Yankees. So it was really undetermined where they would sit. For the Yankees, they would have the next few days off, their next game being Tuesday, May 1st, back in New York against the Detroit Tigers, which means we are officially out of April. And this is where we'll be stopping for this episode. The Yankees are sitting 8-3 at the top of the American League, but Stengel definitely has his issues to figure out. Although he replaced Jerry Lumpy's defensive blunders for the Red Sox series, Phil Rizzuto hadn't been able to find a hit and was already pulled after 2 at-bats in the last game against the Red Sox, presumably because Stengel was not content with that solution. In April, the starting pitchers had a combined ERA of .355 with 76 total innings pitched between them. For the relievers, though, a .495 average, almost an entire run-and-a-half difference, shows the Yankees have some vulnerabilities late in the game. On the hitting side, the Bronx Bombers delivered to their name, hitting 15 home runs in 11 games and scoring a combined 78 runs, making it an average of just over 7 runs a game. It's hard to lose games when you score 7 runs, and they did that on average. With hitting like that, you can almost make up for quite a few errors in the infield and usually can sacrifice a run or two in the later innings and still expect a win. But, like the Orioles and Red Sox just showed them, the Yankees have to come back to the ballpark ready to compete every day. They might be the betting favorites, but the Yankees still have a lot of baseball to play. The Tigers are up next, but until then, thanks for listening, and see you next time.